Got another build guide. This one is for Nurgle. I'm not really a Nurgle main, but no one is, so nothing matters. Nobody plays this faction. Let's do it. If you haven't seen these before, we'll go through every unit, then we'll go through some builds. Sounds good? Sounds good. Chaos Lord of Nurgle. He's actually pretty good. He's a solid little guy. Has some decent debuffs, but he is mostly a tanky lord, which is going to come up a lot for Nurgle. But he's a very tanky lord. He has various debuffs that reduce enemy damage, makes himself tankier, or reduces the enemy's potential to deal damage to him, like reducing melee attack with the Father of Blades. So he has a lot of buffs, and he has various mount options for different things, like a Chaos Steed is cheaper, where Rot Beast has a lot more armor piercing, and a Chariot, if Chariots are good, he can roll through a bunch of people. But Chaos Lord's solid, has some good buffs. Epidemius buffs demonic units. That is the nicest way I can put what he does. And since I try to make these that they're not dependent on the patch, I won't just say he sucks, even though in his current patch he sucks. He sucks. He is terrible. He's garbage. But in the future, if he's maybe good, it'd be if demonic units are better, like Plague Bears or Nurgling Rushes are more of a thing, then his buffs for demonic units are quite solid. But he is not a duelist lord. He is a support lord through and through. For a duelist lord, you have Tamarkon. Tamarkon has a big Toad Dragon mount if he wants a ton of HP, or he can just be a ogre lord with anti-large and armor piercing and some decent buffs and debuffs to help with his dueling capabilities. Tamarkon is a good lord sniping tool. He's also just a solid throw him in and forget about him lord. So very powerful attacking lord, though he's not a caster, which can be a drawback. Herald of Nurgle is the quote-unquote cheap option to be a Nurgle caster. Death and Lore of Nurgle, he has a Locus of Fecundity that can give more healing, so he could even be a death caster with a little bit of healing. You can have a flying mount for a Rotfly or a Palanquin for a cheaper support option, though honestly, I would rather just put him on foot than the Palanquin, but that might just be me. He is demonic, though, so if it gets low, he's going to die. Festus, mortal, meaning if he flees, he can come back, unlike his demonic counterparts. He's also quite cheap for a caster. He has some debuffs, but mostly you just want to take him as a super cheap caster lord with his aura of either healing or his aura of damage. He can be solid in blob fights or holding points and like domination and whatnot, but he's just a cheap caster, cheap and chipper. Pretty squishy if you get someone who can hit infantry-sized characters well, but if they can't hit infantry-sized characters, he's going to be unkillable. Chaos Sorcerer Lord of Nurgle is the more common, cheap option as opposed to the Herald of Nurgle. You can take Nurgle or Death like the other one, but he has Arcane Conduit. He has his self-healing through the Crown of Everlasting Conquest. He has various mount options of the Chaos War Shrine if you want to be like crazy tanky for a blob fight, or a Rot Beast if you want to be a hybrid duelist. He has a lot more going for him and a lot more flexibility than the Herald of Nurgle. If you just want a cheap lord so you can go with a wide build, he's generally a better option. Demon Prince of Nurgle, mixed spell kit, pretty decent duelist, solid caster. He's just a smidge expensive at the current moment, but if he gets cost reduction in the future, I could see him being meta. He is solid at everything, great at nothing. So, yeah, if you just want a flying combat caster lord, he's your guy. Prepare to spend a lot. Exalted Great Unclean One is the more mobile Kugath Plaguefather. He is a bit faster, doesn't get stuck on things as easily, and is a bit better duelist than Kugath is, just because he has better attack animations that are a little more consistent. Can be Death or Nurgle. Has a constant Mortis engine, Arcane Conduit, solid things. You usually want to take him in matchups where you're not worried about getting shot, I guess. You could say the same about Kugath, so I guess he's just a slightly cheaper Kugath Plaguefather. But he's good. Just because Kugath exists doesn't mean this guy's not good. Kugath is the upgraded form of the Exalted Great Unclean One. A Mortis engine and an artillery piece and a pretty solid duelist. He comes at an extremely high price point. He is very tanky, but he is extremely weak to archers. Very, very weak to archers. Since he can't move to save his life, and he has an extremely high profile on top of his throne, and he is gigantic, where the Exalted Great Unclean One is still gigantic, but at least it's like it can kind of get buried in some other units. Kugath can't get buried in anything. He is constantly visible. Anything that can shoot can see him at all times. But if your opponent has low shooting and they have to come fight you in melee, Kugath is unmatched in melee combat with his constant Mortis engine type ability. What is it exactly that does that? Pestilent Decay. Does a lot of damage. He can heal up Nurglings near him, so he's kind of meant to be a Nurgling support lord, but also just a crazy duelist caster Mortis engine. Extremely high price, though. If you're taking Kugath, you just can't go wide. It's not possible. On to the heroes. Cultist Nurgle is decent if you want Chaos Warshrine. He can be taken on a Chaos Warshrine with decent stats instead of just a Warshrine on its own. You can also use Plaguebearer Summon that is okay at best, and he has some pretty significant armor, weapon strength debuffs. So he's useful in blob builds with Kugath if you're going against like Vampire Counts or someone. Let's just pull these guys up. Exalted Hero Nurgle, one of the best Exalted Hero variants in the game. Very tanky, extremely solid 1v1 duelists, especially 2v1. If you take two of them on Rot Beast, they can be rather cheap, or even on Chaos Steeds, honestly. Because they have armor piercing off of Rot Beast, so you don't have to pay the premium if you don't want to. Let's see, you could just cut that, keep Hero Killing Blow, cut that, and they're only 1250. Two of them can beat almost anything. So Exalted Heroes can make a very solid Hero Hammer of just murder. Plague Ridden, I don't know why you would take them. Because your Lord is probably going to be caster, and if your Lord isn't a caster, you could take the Chaos Sorcerer instead. So this is kind of a rebel without a cause. Just being a demonic caster with only 65 leadership means they'll often kill themselves off. In the future, if they've gotten buffed, I guess the only way you'd take them over Chaos Sorcerer is if their price is comparable or they're cheaper. I guess they have a flying mount if you really want a flying hero mount. For the Chaos Sorcerer of Death, very similar to the Chaos Sorcerer of Lord, though he doesn't have the self-healing constantly of the Crown of Domination. Still have Lures of Death and Nurgle, that's really your only option here. And they can be on a Rot Beast for some armor piercing to make them a decent duelist. But I don't have much to say on them that I didn't already say about the Chaos Sorcerer Lord. Finally, Kha'Zix the Befouled. His stats are really good. He's a really good duelist. He's solid at that stuff, has regeneration, has some damage resistance and whatnot, but the main problem is his damage resistance applies at hit points greater than 75%, so if he takes any damage, he loses the damage resistance. It's not that great. He has Befouled Charge, which seems cool. It removes charge defense versus large, but he has to be a part of the charge to do it, and then it's just janky and hard to use, because if you're charging with him and he gets in there first, he'll block some of the other models charging with him. I don't know. Just don't use him for his gimmicks. Use him if you really want another horse-sized duelist. That's it for Lords and Heroes. Infantry. There's a lot of them. There's also a lot of overlap, so I'm just going to pull them all up and we'll rocket through them. Dun, dun, and then there's Plague Ogres. Okay, infantry. Nurglings are your bottom-of-the-barrel, dirt-cheap demonic units on the front line. They're supposed to be the epitome of chaff. I really am down on Nurglings on the current patch, but in the future, maybe they'll get a cost reduction or something. They're meant to just kind of suck and die. But they're, that can be a use. You can get in front of Pestigors, get in front of Chaos Warriors, and take blasting charges or something, and then die, but serve the greater purpose. Nurglings are supposed to be your cheap chaff. They do okay. Marauders of Nurgle, also solid chaff, pretty high HP pools, low cost point, provide constant poison, which most of the stuff in this roster does. They're just cheap. They fill out your front line if you need them to. They really don't do too much damage, though. They'll lose most fights, so be careful with them, I guess. Just know when you're going to take them. Great Weapon variant's the same, but does armor piercing and has less melee defense. Frolickers Bubonic are the ROR Nurglings. These guys are a little bit better because they have heal, higher leadership, and melee damage reflection, making them actually solid, not just solid for a chaff unit, like actually just good. So I like them. I like the Frolickers Bubonic. I hate Nurglings, but the Frolickers are good. Pestigors have been nerfed several times, but they still remain very strong. They have Beastman Primal Fury while also having Tears of Nurgle, which is a huge slow and a vigor debuff. If anything nearby routes in front of them, it's just quite good. But armor piercing faster units of Nurgle with a wide formation and vanguard deployment can give them some resilience in certain matchups. Also 25% missile resistance is nothing to scoff at, so Pestigors are still quite good. Plague Bearers of Nurgle are incredibly slow, very low armor, and unshielded. So they are weak. Weak is an understatement. They are crippled by any ranged unit shooting at them. But if you don't get any ranged units shooting at them, they trade way up in melee combat against most things. Crazy high weapon strength, very decent melee stats, magic damage and poison helps them out a lot. Cloud of Flies also gives them even more melee defense than you'd think, so they have 41 melee defense for 700 gold. If they can get a melee fight, they'll do well. The main problem is cavalry cycle charging them or ranged units of any kind. Chaos Warriors of Nurgle. Armored, shielded, provide poison, crazy high melee defense, all the stuff you expect out of Chaos Warriors generally. Rather defensive. They'll get through a front line eventually. It just takes them a while. But yeah, they're there. They're your slow grinding anvil upon which the hammer needs to fall. Forsaken are your first real aggressive infantry we've seen. I guess Pestigors are aggressive, so the second aggressive infantry we've seen. Pestigors are armor piercing but way less weapon strength. Forsaken have a very high weapon strength and frenzy, which gives them more melee attack. They can like churn through chaff quickly and get onto an enemy's archer line. They're useful versus factions like Bretonnia. Forsaken are good. High armor, high leadership, high damage. Good unit. And 36 charge bonus on infantry is no joke. Like Marauders have 18 and 22. So Forsaken, very offensive. Chaos Warriors are great weapons. Same thing as the Chaos Warriors regular. And since they are Chaos Warriors of Nurgle, they actually have a relatively high melee defense compared to most great weapon infantry. But they're not as tanky as their shielded compatriots. Still solid. Very good if you need to get through armored infantry front lines. Chaos Dwarves, things like that. Warriors of Chaos. Demon Spew, ROR Forsaken with higher stats. That's really it. Just higher stats. Exalted Plague Bearers are like Infernal Ironsworn, kind of. Slow, hit extremely hard, but crazy powerful armor-piercing grenades that they throw. And after they throw those, they're a little bit useless. But they do their job. They're useful in blob builds where you can just take a couple infantry and sit in a healing aura and slowly get healed up by Festus or the War Shrine or something, and then they'll grind away. Like we said about Plague Bearers, they're very, very good in a melee fight if they can get it. They're just very weak to archers in general. With their grenades, these guys counter Cav fine, because if the Cav try and come in, they'll take a nasty grenade volley to the face and regret it. But archers still do very well against these guys. Chosen of Nurgle. Chosen of Nurgle, just Chaos Warriors on steroids. That's it. Higher stats in every way over the Chaos Warriors of Nurgle. Nothing special about them besides that. They don't have ITP or anything. Okay. Chosen with great weapons. Same thing, but against the Chaos Warriors with great weapons. Just higher stats. Good in blob builds. Okay in rush. That's about it. And then the Exalted Plaguebearer ROR, the Festering Stooges. These guys do have their own special passive, Gloom of Flies, that I don't think the Exalted Plaguebearers do. They have Cloud of Flies, which just provides the 9 melee defense. Gloom of Flies provides Terror and 9 melee defense. Duration infinite, cooldown 15 seconds. They don't have it right away. They get it as they fight. That's a little weird. Whatever. Main thing you take them for is they have their own self-regeneration and then higher stats than their regular Exalted Plaguebearer cousins. Higher missile strength too, which is quite nice. But they're incredibly tanky. With 90 leadership, they're going nowhere. They fight to the last man. We have our Plague Ogre friends. Monstrous Infantry, they should honestly just go with Monsters and Beasts, because I have a lot of similar things to say about them as Chaos Spawn and Bile Trolls, but with incredible armor-piercing, high weapon strength, and decent speed compared to most Nurgle things we've seen so far, they're good at helping break front lines. They're good at stopping or damaging enemy cavalry. They're good at surrounding single entities. They're not great at sitting in infantry and just grinding through them, so they'll fight anything that isn't infantry. And if they do fight infantry, they'll do okay at it. They just usually need support or they'll die, because they're very expensive. I mean, 1315, 1450 is nothing to scoff at. Great weapon variant just has bonus versus large and loses 2 melee attack for it, but you pay more money. Yeah. All right, cavalry and chariots. I'm going to throw the missile cavalry in here because it's one whole unit. I missed one. I missed 2. Okay. Missile cavs in here too. Chaos chariots of Nurgle, same as every other chaos chariot. Tanky, disruptive, doesn't do a lot of damage. Has a very hard time clearing out any infantry above the bottom tiers of chaff, But for only 850 gold, they're very, very hard to kill and can stop a lot of archers from firing for quite a while if they're microed appropriately. Chaos Knights of Lances or not, Chaos Knights with Lances get a lot more charge bonus for a lot less melee defense, which is why you usually just see the Chaos Knights of Nurgle regular. 55 melee defense on a cavalry piece is nothing to scoff at. It can make them last incredibly long in these fights, give them more time to get healing from either Fecundity or Fleshy Abundance or something, and keep them in the battle. And it gives more time for Soul Grinders or Furies or Plague Drones to come and offer help. So you usually see the higher melee defense sword and board. It's also cheaper than the Lances. Lances with 80 charge bonus, they're solid if this is going to be like rear charging stuff. So you could, if you really want to take like 2 Chaos Knights regular, 1 Chaos Knight with Lances, and just focus on microing the Lances one. But I don't know. It seems like a lot of work. Just stick with the Chaos Knights of Nurgle. They're tanky, disruptive, do a decent amount of damage like most Chaos Knights. A little spendy. For your damage dealing ones, well, the Chaos Knights, the tanky ones, Rot Knights do a lot of damage. Now, they're also tanky. You're talking about Nurgle, so it's relative. Everything is relative here. Like, everything on this roster is going to be tanky. But more damage is the Rot Knights. Armor piercing, anti-large, very respectable melee attack and melee defense. They have no shields, though, so they are weak to shooting. Only 32 models can limit their DPS somewhat. Rot Knights are very expensive. That's their main drawback. Their stats are good. They'll perform very well into any other cav, but, you know, at a cost. A high cost. Their ROR provides damage resistance the first time before they break. If they break, this is gone for the rest of the game, but they normally have 15% damage resistance. Higher stats, including higher leadership, meaning it's even harder for them to break. The Rotting Riders are good. 2,200 gold is more expensive than the Fireborn and the Royal Outdrift Griffites. You do need to keep these guys safe if you're going to bother. And then we have Marauder Horsemen of Nurgle with throwing axes. Decent-ish melee stats, mostly looking for the armor-piercing poison axes they can throw. This is good for dealing with enemy blobs, not as much for kiting. Throwing axes have crazy low range and a terrible arc of fire for anything that's moving. So these guys really want to throw in on something that's already engaged in melee. That's about it. I guess you could use it to throw at enemy heavy cav that's fighting your Chaos Knights of Nurgle. You can use it to chase stuff off the battlefield. You can try and use it as anti-air, but it's difficult. The only things you could really hit in anti-air is like the Thunder Barge or something that's sitting still and heavily armored. Even gyrocopters can dodge them easily enough. Alright. Monsters and beasts or missile monsters and beasts? Why not all of them? Why not everything? Pull them all up. Pull them all up. Going as fast as I can. I forgot the Chaos War Shrine. Okay. Boom. I had just enough unit slots. Chaos Warhounds with poison. They are dog units. They provide poison. You have seen this on every evil roster that ever existed. They are good at killing archers. They are good at rear charging light cav or light infantry. They do nothing against armor, and they're usually used to just chase things off the battlefield. Chaos Furies of Nurgle. They're the Chaos Fury variant with slightly higher melee defense, I guess. It's not great. It's still not a great amount of melee defense. They provide poison, do magic damage, but this is the Chaos Fury I see the least of, to be honest. I see Slaanesh for armor piercing and Khorne for just higher weapon strength, but Tzeentch and Nurgle don't have very good Chaos Furies. They're still squishy, so calling them tankier than other Furies is pointless. Plague Toads of Nurgle, good at frontline disruption. You don't really want to use them as cavalry. You just want to throw them on top of your infantry and help punch through the front line faster or cause disruption, kind of like a pseudo chariot. On the flanks, they're just too slow, and they don't offer that much to cav fights. With limited melee stats and only 24 models, they don't even do that much damage to cavalry. Unless your opponent just AFK throws their cavalry into them and forgets they exist, I guess you could do okay, but that's asking your opponent to make a lot of mistakes. So Plague Toads generally want to support the front line in a rush. Beast of Nurgle is not much of a duelist. It has some buff and debuff things about it, its own regeneration, so I guess it could be a tanky source of disruption, kind of. Unless it gets some better animations and collision attacks, though, the Beast of Nurgle is just too weak to Archer Fire to be worth it. A low-ish HP pool, 50 armor, doesn't even cause terror. It's tough to justify currently. Again, we're trying to make this without patches mattering, so the beast could get a big couple of buffs, and then it'll be great. So I guess its use case is a kind of supportive buff debuff single entity with a bit of damage, but it's not great. Rotflies are like Furies, but much tankier and provide armor piercing. They are also more expensive, and it depends on how much more damage they do on the patch you're on than Furies. Currently, they're not that worth it, but that is supposed to be their niche, is they're just Furies with armor piercing. They only have 12 models, whereas the Furies have 60, making them harder to kill, but they also do less damage because you only have 12 things committing attacks instead of 60. That's like 1/5 the attack speed. Bile Trolls are regular old trolls with a debuff to enemy melee defense. This can pair nicely with an infantry rush, so maybe you take 1 or 2 and use them as support units on the front line. They have their own regeneration, as most trolls do. They also have crazy low leadership, as most trolls do. But these trolls have 45 melee defense, making that rather nice. Essentially the same job as Plague Toads, just with regeneration for 400 more gold. Pox Riders of Nurgle, even though they look like cavalry, they're still not cavalry. They are the toads, just more elite. So you'd want to use them on your front line to get through the enemy front line. Layer them on top of Marauders or Chaos Warriors to actually deal damage and push people around. That's generally what you want them for. They just can't catch anything. They can't catch cavalry at 65 speed, so it makes it very hard for them to get involved in a cav engagement. Bears of the Bog, Pox Riders are Pox Riders ROR. They do have a Vigor Aura that affects units that are less than 50% HP, which is kind of interesting. So it gives them some vigor back after they've been hurt a lot. I don't know how useful that is, but it's around. Mostly you want them for this. Reduced mass and weapon damage for anybody around them is pretty good. And then the increased stats on top of the Pox Riders makes them much more solid melee combatants in the front line. Very high leadership means they won't demonic instability crumble easily. 80 armor is decent defense against archers. So Bears of the Bog, just a Pox Rider, but better. Chaos War Shrine of Nurgle. I know I skipped over some stuff, I'll get back to it, but the Chaos War Shrine of Nurgle gives healing and leadership to everything around it, like most of the Chaos War Shrines. You're usually going to see a cultist on this, though, for the better stats, because its stats on its own are pretty bad, and it does need stuff to die near it for it to get its healing stacked up, so more useful in a blob build than a rush, to be honest. Back to monsters, we have Chaos Spawn of Nurgle. Like the trolls, but Chaos Spawn of Nurgle are unbreakable. That is really their only use case. They have a high weapon strength, but no armor piercing, unlike the Plague Toads, unlike the Chaos Trolls. So Spawn are better against low leadership, low armor factions like Skaven, maybe Greenskins, maybe. Not Norska, because Norska has Skinwolves. Less damage, more spook. More spook, more scare. Unbreakable makes them difficult to peel off. Plague Drones of Nurgle are flyers like the Rot Flies. They're better than the Rot Flies, both stat-wise and performance. They actually do some damage here and there. High leadership makes them hard to take out. Decently high health pools. These guys can do okay if they get a rear charge or something. Think of them as weird, fucked up Pegasus Knights. They just stop you from getting air cheesed, I guess. Their Death Heads version is actually quite good. The grenades are pretty good at sniping out single entities or blobs of cavalry or infantry that have formed up during an engagement. So, Plague Drone Death Heads can be good for air cheese type builds, or even just 1 or 2, not even to cheese, but just to give yourself some aerial superiority. You want to use their shots sparingly, though. They only have 10 ammo. So use them on big, important engagements rather than just poking for poking's sakes. And the Angels of the Decay Plague Drone Death Heads are very good. Increased stats makes them hard to get rid of, and their grenades do a lot more damage. I didn't mean to delete them. That was actually an accident. There you are. Magic damage shots, very good. 5 more ammo than their regular compatriots. They're good. They can mess up somebody's day. The Angels of the Decay are actually really good right now. Don't know how they'll be on future patches. And lastly, the big monsters. We have Bilious Thunderguff, a giant on steroids. Just has same weapon strength, but higher melee attack, higher melee defense. And then he has a fart he does. Yes, it is literally a fart. It's a vortex that corrodes enemy armor and does some damage. It's solid against armored infantry. Not amazing. Bilious is often a meme, but with 110 leadership, he's pseudo-unbreakable. There's no way you're getting rid of him. So he's a big old beat stick, can fight other large entities quite well. Basic Great Unclean One comes with a Bound Stream of Corruption, a 1 Miasma Pestilence. He does not have the Mortis engine of the Exalted Great Unclean One, making him a difficult thing to justify with only 50 armor and a high profile. He's easy to shoot. But he's an okay duelist, kinda. You want to take him if you're really worried about enemy infantry-sized single entities and you have nothing else to deal with them, I guess. There's not a lot of use cases for this guy, unfortunately. Toad Dragon is supposed to be more like a Jabber Scythe. Charges through infantry with big collision attacks. Can get rid of big piles of armored infantry, and then with very high weapon strength can also slap them afterwards. Has a breath attack too. Main weakness, as we've talked about a lot, is low armor, high profile, pretty easy to shoot. So, user beware. Uncle Frunkle is a Great Unclean One ROR. He brings Stream of Corruption, Spirit Leech, and an AoE Defiling Deluge, which is pretty much just Soul Stealer. It heals him up while damaging opponents. He is better than the Exalted not Exalted, the regular Great Unclean One, because he actually has more of an identity. He's good in blob builds, he's good against enemy blob builds, better at Lord Sniping, but that's about it. So he's against blobs, and Lord Snipe is usually what you want to use him for. And then the Soul Grinders. Basic Soul Grinder fires a triple shot artillery to deal with archers. Archers or infantry, maybe some cavalry. He doesn't do anything to single entities, doesn't do anything to enemy artillery, doesn't do really anything to flying units either. He is a piss poor duelist in melee combat, so you're mostly using him as an artillery piece just to clear out blobs or to kite enemy forces. This is your really only kite tool is Nurgle. The throwing axes aren't gonna do it. It's these guys. So if you're trying to kite the enemy, force them out of their formation, Soul Grinders of Nurgle are how to do it. The Noxbringer is a Soul Grinder that has special ammo destruction. He is very good against enemy kite or enemy artillery because of his ammo reduction. It's not as much about the damage, but you just shoot at them until they don't have ammo anymore, and then they have to come into you. And then they spent a bunch of money on ranged units that get turned into melee units because of your ammo corrosion. That's about it. His accuracy isn't actually better than the regular Soul Grinder, so don't take him to try and, like, snipe out stuff. He's just a Soul Grinder. You're only taking him for that ammo reduction thing. That's it. That's the whole roster. It's still pretty small after 2 DLCs, honestly. And they're not doing the best right now. So talking about the current patch, let's make up a build. Kislev. Oh boy. Kislev. Might want Festus. Festus can do okay here. Fleshy Abundance to heal himself up if he needs it. Skip Children Nurgle. So you can take him at his base 1450 price point. You're going to want to throw him into the front line to try and keep him safe because the Tsarina or whoever on a Froststorm has really good anti-large. They're going to have a harder time hitting him on foot. Archers are going to have a hard time shooting him because Kislev has a ton of archers or pistols, which is why we're trying to avoid some of the bigger profile people. The only reason I take him over the Chaos Sorcerer Lord of Nurgle, who is also a good option here, is I like his Mortis Engine for dealing with Kislev's front line if they're going to try and hard blob or box or something. But the Chaos Sorcerer Lord is also a very viable choice here. You could even take him for Fate of Buna, but anyway. I would prefer Festus with just Fleshy Abundance and then walk him into the front line and keep him in your Chaos Warriors to help grind through the front. Speaking of that front line, some Pestigores can be solid, some Chaos Warriors can be nice as well. I don't even bother with the great weapons because losing shields and losing 12 melee defense is brutal against Kislev. So I would do something like this to get through the front line. You could cut one of these and get the Demon Spew. That would also be acceptable. Fuck it, let's do this because it's a little more fun. Rot Knights to deal with the enemy cavalry, which can be problematic. Let's get 2 Chaos Knights and a Rot Knight. The Rot Knight is going to have to be doing a lot of the rear charging, so Chaos Knights will have to take the Griffin Legion charge head on, and then Rot Knights will loop around and get behind them. Something to that effect. So your Rot Knights are going to take up most of your micro there. We can have dogs to provide a little bit of support and get onto enemy archers or run off anything that's already routing. What else do I have to worry about here? Guess not a ton. I don't want to take Angels of Decay or anything because Kislev has a lot of anti-air shooting, which can make it difficult to get these guys into a good position. What am I most worried about from Kislev? The 3rd Chaos Knight seems excessive. Could do a Chaos Chariot and then 600 gold, get the Frolickers Bubonic. Could do something like that for backline disruption from the Chaos Chariot. Though this build is very small. Could also cut those guys and go a different route. Could get Furies if you want to just dive the backline and be disruptive. I don't know about that. Could grab more Nurglings if you really want to just have increased width. Any of those are really fine. I think this core is the main of what I would try to do. Could also grab 2 throwing axes in case of bears or something. It's difficult. Like I said, this is the main core you would want. Try and punch through the front line. Do some good. You could go with a Soul Grinder and try and scoot and shoot. In that case, you want to cut the Demon Spew and maybe get 2 Nurglings. And then this guy can shoot at any pockets of anything. If they have a little Grom, he's going to need to dodge around a bit. This is probably the best you can do. Another thing you could do that's quite different, but you could do... Where was my Demon Spew? There you are. Demon Spew, and then what? 3 Plague Toads? Yeah, 3 Plague Toads. Or 2 Plague Toads to help break through the front line and like a Bile Troll or something. This would be like you're layering the Plague Toads and the Bile Trolls on top of the front line to really punch through that front line, and then you're keeping the Chaos Knights and Nurgle and the Rot Knights to stop Griffin Legion or Warbear Riders from getting the flank on you and rear charging you and breaking your trolls. That's one way of doing it. Alright, I have to do another build. Kislev's mostly defensive, has some cavalry too, so what do we think about something entirely different? Tomb Kings? Sure, Tomb Kings. That's a challenge. In the current meta, Tomb Kings are a lot better than Nurgle, but what would I do to try and stop them? I would go Timmy Tams, honestly. Timmy Tams, cut everything except for Nurgle's favored son. Honestly, cut Nurgle's favored son. So he's only 1450. And with the Feast of the Maggot Lord, he can be super dangerous to Cetra or whoever the enemy takes as a lord, so they won't want to fuck with him too much. And then you need a caster, so let's take a cast Sorcerer of Death with just Spirit Leech on a Chaos Steed. Because I don't want him dueling that Sphinx of Usef or anything spooky. So you could do that. You could also do Lore of Nurgle with just Stream of Corruption spam to try and kill off enemy Skellingtons. In that case, yeah, put him on a Chaos Steed, keep Children of Nurgle, cut everything else. Either one of those is fine. For now, I'm going to do the Lore of Death because I think I want more single entity sniping than I want infantry killing, because I think I'll be okay versus Tomb King's infantry killing wise. I'm going to do the Frolickers Bubonic. I'm going to do 4 Marauders and then 2 Forsaken. And I'll send the Marauders in first, the Forsaken kind of in the gaps here and there, because I imagine the Marauders will get killed off by kitty cats and whatnot. I think Exalted Plaguebearers could be kind of fun here. You could use their grenades against enemy single entities. Could be fun, but it's not the type of build we're doing right now. Just saying it is a possibility. Angels of Decay could do okay. The main problem is Ushapti Great Bows. Their grenades don't do that well against Ushapti, and they will get poked out constantly. Hot take. This could be too hot. This could be a bad take, but I think we grab some Plague Ogres here and some Plague Toads just for mass and armor piercing to punch through the front line, disrupt the Ushapti Great Bows, keep the Sphinx of Usef and Cetra from doing too much. And Usirian's Incantation of Vengeance is a very nasty spell right now, so that's why I'm avoiding taking Cavalry, is because Cavalry is just fresh meat for Usirian's casts. But these guys are a little tankier against it, so Plague Ogres and Plague Toads of Nurgle can do okay. And then we could get like the Barons of the Bog to round out to a 0 gold spend, but this could be one way of doing it. Just hard rush the Tomb Kings, break through their front line, and have no good targets for Usirian's Incantation of Vengeance. The Necrosphex ROR, you'll want to isolate it with Timmy Tams and some Plague Ogres backing them up, maybe the Barons of the Bog as well. That could be one way. Spirit Leeching it as well, Spirit Leeching Cetra or anything like that. But you honestly want to ignore the cats as much as possible and punch through that front line and shut down the Ushapti Great Bows, and then deal with the cats in the late game. Don't get too distracted by them. Because the whole time you're going to try and surround them and fight them or something, Ushabti Great Bows are going to be shooting you in the ass, so it blows. But it's a tough matchup, so I'm not saying this is going to be, like, perfect, but this is probably the best chance you have. All right, there's your build guide. Goodbye. Roar. Subscribe, yes, yes.